Welcome to my annual ranking of all the movies I had seen in the previous year. I know this is coming out in February when it probably should be coming out in January, but I'm just not very good at functioning. And you might also think that this is the first annual edition of this, but it's not. All the other editions are hidden in non-disclosed locations around the world. And we're going to be counting down my bottom 10 movies. There's going to be 5 parts because I watched 50 movies. And I know I said that these are my worst, but there's only 3 movies in here I don't like, so, you know. Now, normally I do not give films low ratings if I find them to be so bad they're good, because I had a positive experience. And I rate the film more based on my experience rather than the actual quality of the film, because I find it hard to objectively measure quality, and it's a lot easier to just base it off my experience, and I enjoy that kind of personal connection with movies. Now, I gave this a 1 star, which is 1 star of 10, which is absolute hate. I despise it. And I gave this because the film is respect people who don't believe in COVID. And upon my first viewing of the film, I figured I need to be more critical because I give so many films such high ratings because I just love watching films. You should hear me gush about Fred 3, which, despite what the people may tell you, is unironically such a good movie because it is just consistently entertaining, because there are 2 types of jokes, and some jokes are so bad and that's why they're funny, and then other jokes that are unironically funny, so you're consistently entertained. And but we're not talking about the great Fred 3, this whole series, because I didn't watch it last year. Last time I watched it was 2020, sorry. And I don't believe that my 1 star was completely justified, but still, when I think about it, it's not just respect people who don't believe in COVID. It's also just they give bad tips. They're not malicious, but they do this thing where they're wear a mask, but once it's inconvenient, let's take off the mask so we can sing and stuff. And it's just one of my biggest pet peeves when people do that. COVID can't travel when you're talking, or COVID can't travel when you're eating. Shut up. Either wear the mask or don't wear it at all, because it's probably still better than not wearing it at all, for health. But I'm selfish, so I care more about what annoys me than what's good for society. And but back to the movie, I guess there's really nothing to talk about except it's complete snub at the 420 Awards. And you can see how where there was to talk about it, because I have gone on a record breaking 2 tangents in this one entry. So that's exciting. So unlike Cool Cat, where I went in trying to hate it, I went in actively trying to love it. Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I saw the backlash it got, and I equated it to the constant hive mind around new equals bad. I hate this idea so much, and I was hoping this movie was good. But I'm sorry to say, it's just not. This does not understand how the plot of the book works, or how any plot should work, realistically speaking. So, why is this? Well, it's because it destroys the keystone species of the book, Greg being bad. And I see a lot of people, when they talk about the movies or the books, they talk about Greg being bad, right? And not just the way, this is an analysis of this character in the book, and the way that they are complaining, saying this is something wrong with the piece of media, which is so just stupid. Because Greg being a horrible person is what makes the book good. And if you want evidence about that, look at this movie where we see what would happen if Greg wasn't horrible. Because the basic structure of the book is Greg has comedic train of thought that causes him to do something bad, right? And then we see him get his comeuppance, and it's comical because we're seeing a bad person get bad stuff happening to him. So what connects these scenes together? What's the main glue of the movie is Greg being bad, and what makes the scenes entertaining is Greg being bad. When this is removed, the movie is just scenes happening, just, without any actual context. Things just happen to these people, and bad stuff happens to Greg, and we feel bad for him, and there's no jokes because they removed Greg being bad, and that was what's funny about the book. Yeah. So, Just One of the Girls I gave it 5 stars because it kind of averages out due to having some bad stuff and like an occasional good thing, but it's mostly just filled with neutrality, really. It's mostly your standard boring 90s comedy. It doesn't really do anything unique. It doesn't have that many interesting plot points, or really, I think, a single moment that made me even consider that there was something humorous happening. And we left no impression in my brain because I completely forgot why I gave it a 5 star and nothing lower until I reread my review, which is a bad sign. And upon rereading my review, I said the best part was the boys' arc, which kind of came back to me kind of slyly. I don't remember what his arc was, but I do remember there being an arc, which is, I guess, what brought this movie up, and what brought it down from being fine is that it's kind of anti-trans, which makes sense for being, a 90s movie. But I don't think cross-dressing for comedy is inherently anti-trans, but this explicitly has transgenderism being a key plot point in the movie. So, the plot of this movie, is that the guy wants to go to this music school, but in order to get in, he has to be a girl, which I cannot remember the reason for. But, he's in the school, he goes, and he has to change in the girls' locker room, and he's out there ogling all the women, woo, yeah. And so the coach is like, she, is a lesbian. And so she wants to go, talk to him about it, because the coach is also the counselor. And, I was like, okay, good on them for being, cool about being lesbian. But he reveals that he's, cross-dressing because, he thinks that's what he's been called in for. But, in order to not get in trouble for cross-dressing, he pretends to be trans. And this is where it just goes insane. So the counselor basically holds the opinion that being trans is kind of like hiding from reality. It's kind of a mental blockage from reality. It's not something that's acceptable. And so they basically just decide the best solution to him being trans is to stop being trans. And the way that they want this to occur is that they want the person to come out, as being a cross-dresser, basically, because they don't really fully believe in transgenderism, to his high school in the 90s, which is oh my God, crazy. Okay, so this is the first time we're going to kind of stick in the same numerical category for a while, so I'm going to kind of explain it. So 6 out of 10 is a good average. It's okay. And a 5 out of 10 is okay. And then a 4 out of 10 is okay. You know what I'm saying? But, Hush is fine. It's the first movie on this list I've liked, which is cool in some fashion. but there just isn't really much to latch on to. There's nothing really wrong with the movie. It's a perfectly fine experience. Yeah, these 6 out of 10 movies are going to be hard because, when you get something that bounces out to being all the way neutral, like just one that goes, that's entertaining. But I have genuinely nothing to say about Hush. Okay, so originally what I was going to do for the hairdresser was I was going to be like, oh, you're just talking about hard to talk about movies, because they're boring. And I was going to say, this is the hardest because it's a line, 6 seconds long. Apparently I misremembered because it's actually 30 seconds long. And I was going to say, oh, to quote my letterbox, this is all I have to say about it. She's cute. Which, I still agree with, but upon checking the video to see how long it was, I made a new observation, which was that she was, shaven. Like, her armpits were shaved and whatnot. And I was like, I didn't realize that girls did that like that back in the past. I kind of figured that was a relatively modern thing, Because, it's not like they were showing their armpits off, even when they went swimming. And it's like, I just figured that wouldn't be until women commonly showed off more skin that they would start shaving, It's like, it just confused me. So this is the first James Bond movie I've ever seen. I feel like it kind of whets my appetite for more James Bond media because it does a lot of stuff that I find entertaining, but I feel like it could just be done a lot better. For example, with the action. I really enjoyed the globe-trotting aspect. I loved seeing these different areas and these different set pieces. That was the most entertaining aspect of the movie for me. But the actual action itself felt like it was lacking somewhat. It felt like there was something more to be desired, and I don't fully understand why, because I'm not a smart man. I'm a dumb boy, and I don't quite understand many things. Like movies, for example, despite the fact I'm making a review of multiple movies. But, it's just because it's an easy thing to do, really. And I feel the same way about the non-action bits. Like, James himself has a few funny moments, but I don't feel like any of the characters really fully got to shine, like, there was one funny moment I can remember where James was like, oh, I'm not staying in this hotel, even though it fits our cover, and then he says, goes to a fancy hotel and says, oh, we're teachers, but we won the lottery. That was funny. I enjoyed that. But that's like the only character moment I can remember of the movie. And I kind of want to see the James Bond movies that are considered really good to make me appreciate what can be done in a James Bond movie. And I feel like my rating of this is a bit lower because of the assumption that there are better versions of this exact thing out there. Which, if there are not, then I don't know. Yo, so good news. We are finally out of the 6 out of 10s and into the 7 out of 10s. Now, 7 out of 10 movies are movies that I think are good. These are like the movies I start to want to recommend to people. So, we are not even out of the bottom 10. I'm already to the movies that I think are good. So, and that's telling you something. These are movies I want you to watch. But we are at Forget Me Not, which is not the Forget Me Not that is really good and an amazing movie that you guys are going to see later in the list. Wink. Ha 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 ha. It's, a student film. And it's kind of about as good as you can really hope for from a student film. It's about this 1930s character who sees a redesign and gets jealous, and because she thinks she's being replaced, but then sees that the redesign is being made with love, and so they, become friends. Kind of a callback to my earlier point about the new is bad. I planned this out. I made this movie, actually. But, it's a basic, just little cute short film. The animation's occasionally nice. It's just kind of not that much in the film, though. It feels like it's trying to insert a heart into the movie, but they forgot to open the chest cavity. But I can't really fault them too much. It's like, it's a student film. You can't really be too mad, which, I still had a good time. I, smiled a bit. I did a little classic smirk eyebrow raise combo. But, yeah, it's fun. Okay, Jesus Christ. I have seen this movie so many times. Like, a couple of times with my family at Christmas. I get right, because this is a Christmas movie. You're going to watch it with your family at Christmas. But there are more movies that are better at being a Christmas movie than Elf, for a variety of reasons. And you'll see some in the list. Well, actually, just one. There's one other Christmas movie I watched this year. But, And this is not the only times I've watched this movie. I've watched this movie so many times in Spanish class, which is annoying because it's not even like a Spanish movie. And I can get it with an American movie that's about Spanish culture. Like something like Coco is one, a good movie, and two, about Spanish culture. Even The Book of Life, which is a movie I don't like as much. I still think it's a good movie, but I don't like it as much as something like Coco. It's about Spanish culture, so I get why we're watching in Spanish class. But this is an American movie. It's one of the most American movies, really. And it's the real kicker. We don't even always watch this movie in December. I watched this movie in November in Spanish class. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, can we watch something else? You do not know my pain until you've watched Elf in November in school, so it's not even at once. You gotta separate over multiple class periods. In Spanish, no English subtitles, and you don't even really speak Spanish. You can go like, hola, but you don't actually speak Spanish. And it's just like, oh my God. And so, the actual movie, do I really need to explain Elf? Like, I'm assuming you've seen Elf, but my main thing is that, it doesn't feel like a Christmas movie to me. It doesn't really fill me with any sort of Christmas spirit. It's just too standard. And kind of the joys I get out of this movie aren't its standardity? I don't know. Like, when I see it do traditional little 2000s traditions, I feel like it transitions. I feel like a bit of nostalgia. I'm like, oh, it's like a 2000s thing. That's what I watched as a kid, even though I didn't watch Elf as a kid. And that kind of gives me some joy. But when my favorite part of your movie is the little editing transitions, because they're nostalgic, not even because they're good, that's not really the greatest sign. But it's good. I can't come out here and tell you guys that Elf is a bad movie. It's a good movie. It's just not a movie that's really for me. I'm sorry. Now, the In-Betweeners movie is a bit weird because it feels like it's at once trying to be your typical teen comedy film while also trying to subvert it. And the parody parts land. Like, whenever there's a joke and that subverts the common tropes of a teen film, I hoot and I holler. While the more stock attributes make me whimper and a waller. Like, the conflict in the movie is so normal. Like, you could put any characters in it. And I feel like the In-Betweeners gave us a lot of depth. The show, not the film. Gave us a lot of depth into the characters that could work in a more serious story. I felt invested in these characters because they all had unique attributes and characters that had depth and intrigue to them. But here, all the drama they put them through is so standard, and it just is not something that's entertaining, and it's also not as funny as the show a lot of the time, you know. And I feel like that's because of its more standardized nature. But even through this, I still think it's a pretty good film. It's still enjoyable to watch. I would still recommend it. It's funny. It's got some funny bits. That's about all it has. But, you know, I do recommend watching the show instead of this if you're given the choice. But, you know, there's also such a shocking amount of male nudity. Like, I'm American, so nudity in a teen movie is not really common. You know, at least the teen movies I was exposed to. I mean, I guess I still am a teen, but maybe there's more nudity than I'm aware in movies specifically marketed towards teens. But there's just, like, constantly full frontal male nudity. And it's, like, that's crazy to me. I think there might also be female nudity, but there's way more male nudity because the characters are male, you know. And rounding out our bottom 10 is If Anything Happens, I Love You, which I just don't feel is that special of a movie. It's a well done movie, don't get me wrong, but it didn't really garner any sort of unique emotional response from me. It still made me sad, you know, but it wasn't anything special. It still feels like it's perfectly capable of making someone feel some sort of unique emotion. It just didn't personally resonate with me that much, you know. Which sucks because from an analysis perspective, which I guess is what this is really not an analysis. It's very basic surface level, like, haha, this movie is good because it kind of makes me laugh, I think. But I can talk for hours about a movie that makes me feel a big emotional response, negative or positive. But when it doesn't really do something for me, I can't talk more than, like, it wasn't for me. Though I have one big take on this, and that's I don't think the metaphor works at all. Like, it constantly has different levels of, like, what this spirit thing can interact with the family and how it can not interact with the family. And I feel like it doesn't allow you to make a meaningful connection to what this is trying to represent. Like, maybe it's supposed to be just an emotional thing. It's not supposed to have a concrete connection to something. But even still, I just don't think it works. You know, if someone can explain it, then, like, I'm open to saying I just don't get it, but I just don't think it works. I'm sorry, man.